Hello, this is Primal JQ, and I'm doing a little, not necessarily a reaction video, because I tried to do one last night, and it took me the whole bleeding time before I realised I had my microphone off, because I haven't been recorded that through the ages, so I thought, I'll just leave it off, there's no point anymore. Anyway, but it's on now, and it's new. I got a new mic, it's USB one. I don't know how it'll actually fare in terms, because the last one I had, it was just jack one, but it was an old one, and there was a heck of a lot of really horrible high pitch interference. So I decided to shop around for a USB mic. It's nothing special, it's not a Yeti or anything like that, because it's kind of hard to come by these days. I've just got a fairly cheap mic. It works. That's the important thing at this juncture. Enough about that. What are we talking about? We are talking about the reveal of the future of gaming. Or I might as well just say the reveal of Sony's next generation platform, the PlayStation 5. I recall and go over the events of this live stream event that I wasn't even there for because I was too busy with work. But then afterwards, I did actually have a chance to view the stream. It was fairly long in all complete honesty, so even though I did a live reaction to it, it'll probably be cut down immensely. Anyways, so what did I think of this entire sort of experience? Very, very slick, even by Sony standards. Had a lot of these kind of like stings and interstitials where very much exemplifies the sort of styling of the PlayStation brand, and also kind of a bit of a tease up to the reveal of the hardware itself. What they began with, which I'm actually really happy to announce, was essentially just games. And while I say that I'm glad they started with games, the fact that they literally started the entire event with, well, not just the sting wheel of the generation prior, highlighting a bunch of PlayStation 4 games from Gran Turismo Sport all the way up to God of War, the later releases like Ghost of Tsushima and the next installment of The Last of Us. They started off with Grand Theft Auto 5, and it was literally just Grand Theft Auto 5, as in the Grand Theft Auto 5 on PlayStation 4. And what they showed was, it almost had me sort of thinking of like Saints Row almost. It was almost wacky as that. You had flipping DeLoreans flying about the place. You had a Formula One crash bang all up scenario. Even Tron bugs, it was just all kind of crazy. But it looked very much like a last gen game, or even though I suppose you can call it a current gen game, even though that was a port of a last gen game. And that had me worried. I'm like, oh, are we really just getting ports of PlayStation 4 games onto PlayStation 5? That doesn't make sense. Considering the PS5 is supposed to be backwards compatible, why are we just showing Grand Theft Auto 5 at its barest bones possible? They said it was coming to 2021 to PlayStation 5. And if you got it early, there was some special sort of thing that you're gonna get through it. I think it was like $1 million in GTA cash every month on PlayStation Plus. To me, that was like, okay, that doesn't really help in setting the stage of the rest of the presentation. Because are we just gonna be getting cross-gen titles? And obviously the answer for the most part would kind of be yes, but then you want to know what makes the PlayStation 5 next gen. But that was the beginning of the show. So the next game that came along, which had seemed a bit more promising, was essentially Spider-Man, which it wasn't just any old Spider-Man, it was indeed Miles Morales of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse fame. And that got me excited. Although, again, in terms of like the graphics, I didn't really see anything that differentiated that much from the PS4 release. And, it got a lot of people wondering if it was just DLC, and even in Twitter basically said, oh, it's just DLC. Insomniac said, actually, no, it's a standalone game, and it's coming in the holiday of 2020 on the PlayStation 5. It was fun to see, it was great to see that Spider-Man was getting some love, especially on the PlayStation 5, but again, it seems like a cross-gen title. Then we got to something that would be really exciting, and that was indeed the creator of Gran Turismo came up and essentially talked about the next installment of that particular game. And that was actually indeed Gran Turismo 7. It looked absolutely gorgeous. Few sweeping shots of all the people in the garages, and obviously a few vistas and tunnels and stuff like that. It showed what I suppose looks like gameplay in the view of the car, and it was indeed confirmed to be Gran Turismo. The thing about that is it looked gorgeous, but again, it looked like, Gran Turismo. There wasn't really anything there that made me think, oh my god, we're in the next gen now. It was essentially a snippet of a game, and that is something that permeated most of this presentation that didn't excite or wow me. I was looking for something like maybe more detailed sort of destruction in Gran Turismo. There wasn't even that much of that. There was like all these wonderful sort of views and vistas and stuff like that. The real problem was, I think, really, that despite it looking great, it was basically just Gran Turismo as you would do most of the same game on most other platforms. There was nothing there that essentially showed off what the PS5 can do. I mean, obviously there's things like ray tracing and stuff like that, but it wasn't immediately apparent in that trailer. And again, that sort of permeated throughout the presentation. I think what we really need to see is, not just the show. I think the tell is going to obviously tell us a bit more of what Gran Turismo 7 is going to bring to the series that is new and is taking advantage of the next generation hardware. Right after that, a reveal of a new Ratchet and Clank game, which looked absolutely fan-freaking-tastic. The thing about this one, though, is that as you watched the trailer, one thing it did was you essentially see gameplay of Ratchet sort of jumping through these hyperdimensional rifts and going from one really detailed and extremely busy environment to another. And it was all really kind of quick. It was just like snapshots of gameplay through all these environments. And to me, there was a hint of what the PlayStation 5 can do there, because the main selling point of it is the extremely fast SSD, which essentially, as they've said many times before, kind of eliminates load times. And the technology that the SSD is built around actually minimizes the amount of time that models and environments and sort of different sections of games load another, so it's all kind of seamless. So there was promise there, plus there was a new character that popped out of nowhere who looked female, but there was something that someone said about the females not having a tail or something, and this new character does, so it might even be transgender representation, I don't know. But essentially, it's a new character who Clank runs into after he's been split from Ratchet as they were jumping from one dimension to another, which brings us to the title of the game, which is called Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. So that showed some promise. You saw more shots of the game, which kind of showed a bit of superior lighting, and I don't know if that's down to the ray tracing or whatever, but it does look really nice. Again, though, it didn't seem to be a graphical leap, and again, I'll talk more about that later. So the next game that showed up was from Square Enix, and the title was Project Athia or something like that, which showed a female warrior or sorcerer maybe, sort of like going through these sort of rocky environments and essentially throwing some sort of arcane magic about and about defeating monsters. So it doesn't seem really clear as to what sort of a game it is, if it's sort of like an action adventure game or an RPG or anything like that. And it almost felt familiar in that there was something that was shown, not necessarily similar, but it was kind of like that for the PlayStation 4 using Unreal 4 engine or something like that. So I don't really know what is to come of it. They did have some really nice effects though, like had a lot of volumetric clouds, and it had a lot of rocks and foliage. Again though, whether it was a clear graphical leap always comes to question. They did actually say that the footage that was shown in here was all running off the PlayStation 5. Which, again, I'd like to take things like that with a pinch of salt, going by past experience. But if that's what they're pushing forward into it, I can fairly believe it, because really a lot of what was shown didn't really leap out to me as anything other than a video game. You know, it wasn't just the environments, it was the animations as well. It all felt very video game-esque, and not like there's anything wrong with that, but the way people are kind of pushing next gen is that they were supposed to heighten the realism and this and that, but it still felt very current gen and even last gen in places, especially when it does come to things like player movement, cameras, and didn't feel that far removed from what you would see from a PlayStation 4 game. But enough about that. The next title looked interesting. It was by Blue 12, and as you went through the trailer, you kind of wondered who's the main protagonist of this, and it turns out it's a cat. The game I'm talking about is titled Stray, and you play as a cat walking around a futuristic urban environment where mostly robots are living lives, doing all sorts of things that you'd expect humanoid robots to do, but it's just a cat walking around a backpack. I think this also kind of looked really impressive in terms of the lighting and the environment and even the movement, because even though they're supposed to be robots and they're supposed to move like robots, the cat moved very naturally. Again, I wouldn't say it was utterly realistic animation, but it did look convincing enough to make me feel that actual work was put into this game and the hardware that was driving it able to push all this forward. Despite that, the fact of the matter is it's all in this kind of like tightly closed environment. There's high buildings everywhere, with lights coming off of each other. It looks really nice, but again, whether it's something, it's not that huge a leap from what you'd see in a game like, I don't know, Infamous, certain games like that, even the Final Fantasy VII Remake, even though there's loads of work put into that game anyway, so maybe that's not very a fair comparison, but even with that, it looked really nice. But again, whether it looked next gen, yeah, you can already see there's this common theme going on here. After that, they went over a bit on the specs and the capabilities of the machine. For starters, it's got a Ultra HD Blu-ray player, which you'd have thought, well, what's the big deal about that? The Xbox One S and the Xbox One X has that, but the PlayStation 4 Pro didn't actually ship with one, so the PS5 is going to be the first Sony console product to actually have an Ultra HD Blu-ray built in. That's how it is, really. And then they obviously talked about the SSD. They talked about that it has ray tracing abilities. They talked more about the DualSense with its haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. They confirmed it's got a motion sensor in it. Just like the last couple of ones, so that's not particularly that big of a deal. Just most of the stuff that you kind of expect. So the only real interesting thing about the controller, really, other than the adaptive triggers, is that haptic feedback. And how is that going to affect your gaming experience? We didn't really give a huge hint to that other than the fact that it has it. You know, there wasn't anything there in the presentation that showcased what haptic feedback would add to gaming. It just showed the controller in the pile of dust reacting to it. That's literally all it was. It was really stuff that we knew about already. You know, it showed what the controller looked like, but it didn't show what the hardware looked like. So that was a thing. Obviously, that was still teasing about that. Anyway, so the next game that showed up from Housemarque, and it was a game called Returnal, which I have to say looked pretty creepy. And when I say pretty creepy, it was kind of like almost like 2001 in that it was, you know, sort of spacefaring horror game where the player goes through all these weird sort of nightmarish scenarios, but they're in a spacesuit and they're in a space station and stuff like that. But the thing is, the thing that scared me, really, the thing that looked most frightening to me wasn't like the object creatures that were running around the player. It was the player model itself. It really kind of like straddled the uncanny valley of, you know, what a realistic human is supposed to look like. It looked absolutely frightening. I kind of wonder if it was simply an art direction choice, but even given that, you kind of wonder if the reason why they went with the player character looking like that was to actually add to the tension of the whole thing, you know, rather than just to look like a realistic human being. And again, most of the stuff I saw in this trailer, it looked really nice, but whether it was beyond the capabilities of a last-gen machine wasn't really that apparent to me. But it did look like an interesting title, something to look forward to. Housemarque do a lot of really awesome titles, so this might actually be another feather in their cap as far as the quality of the game is concerned. But it just looks really creepy. Just whether it's for the right reasons, we don't know. Anyway, the next game that came out was from Sumo Digital. It turns out to be another installment, or maybe even a spin-off of the Little Big Planet series. And the game is actually called Sackboy: A Big Adventure, which is the Sackboy running through a 3D environment, unlike the other Little Big Planet games which were most 2D, and essentially going through all these crazy environments that you expect to see from a Little Big Planet game. It looked interesting. There were some things that kind of stood out to me, like you could see more Sackboy's sort of like loose woolly bits coming off from the wall. There were some bits in there that was like really nice water and lighting and stuff like that. But again, I didn't see what was next gen about it. Even with it being a PlayStation 5 game, it didn't even stand out from, you know, the first Little Big Planet game as far as I'm concerned. It was mostly the same sort of style, graphics and lighting and stuff like that. There wasn't anything there that made me think, oh my gosh, we in the next gen now. I'm not going to say it looks like a PS3 game, but it didn't have anything there to me that make it stand out from what Little Big Planet was like on the PS3, other than a fair few teeny little things here and there. And then you kind of wonder, in terms of what Little Big Planet's gameplays, like how it will translate to 3D. We'll still have these weird floaty jump things and stuff like that. Because Little Big Planet, in terms of what it was, it was kind of like a do-it-yourself platformer game where you actually were able to create things, on the fly while you were playing, and that's was pretty much what its hook was. How that translates to 3D, if at all, and what's it going to offer? Because it didn't really show that much of it in that trailer. It just showed a lot of basic gameplay. But I suppose it's one to look out for. Kind of interesting it didn't come from Media Molecule, but maybe they're too busy with other stuff. And like I said, it is a spin-off. The next game they showed actually looked kind of interesting because it looks, to me, like they're kind of going back to a game that launched with the PlayStation called Destruction Derby. But with this one, it seems like they've gone absolutely cock-a-hoop with it. It's in a futuristic environment. The drivers pretty much feature as, they look almost like gang members, and the whole thing looks kind of crazy in a Overwatch Fortnite kind of way, if you get that. And they drive these futuristic cars with all sorts of weaponry and stuff like that, and you kind of drive around in this arena smashing into cars, and you can also jump out of the cars and run around the environment, probably trying to jack someone else's car or something like that. It looked absolutely mental. That was one of the more interesting games of the showcase, and to me, even though it's just called Destruction Allstars, it kind of makes me wonder if it is actually based on Destruction Derby and it's a continuation of that franchise, or if it's just a completely new one. Kind of interesting, it's all based in London as well, and it's kind of like a futuristic London with all these London gangs doing all the London shit, So, even with that, looking at it, it's like, wow, this looks absolutely crazy, all these destruction environments, and you kind of wonder, well, that's certainly a bit of a showcase. Here's a problem with a lot of these presentations. They were playing on a live stream, which a lot of people, I watched the VOD afterwards, so I actually got a decent amount of quality from the shots, but people were complaining that the quality of the stream was absolutely terrible, and you could barely see what was going on, especially in a game where essentially you're running around a fast-paced, heavily lit, neon-lit environment with brightly coloured cars driving around the place and crashing in destructive this, that, and other, and the stream wasn't able to cope. And it was the same in the case of the Ratchet and Clank reveal. It was just too much going on at once to actually appreciate that. This was all running at 4K at a decent frame rate, and even with the VOD, I couldn't really see anything that was running over 30 frames per second, which kind of made me think, oh, we're not getting 60 frames per second, guys. It's a pipe dream. It's essentially, we're just going to load more graphics on there and make it look really nice. And, it's just visuals, shiny visual image quality over performance, which kind of made me wonder, well, what's next gen about all of this? And it's sad because this game looks absolutely fan-freaking-tastic, but then makes you wonder if all that could have been done on the PlayStation 4. I'd say it's questionable whether it can, because there's a lot going on in that trailer, but it was also running a dogged frame rate, so you just don't know. This next game was done by a couple of brothers who had their own animation studio, and it pretty much showed in this trailer, because the animation in it was pretty much top notch. The style almost reminded me of... Now, I did say kind of like Avatar, but when I say Avatar, I really mean the Last Airbender, not that other Avatar that we don't talk about anymore for some reason. But, it did look very much like a CG animation that you would see in the movies. It had these lush environments, stylized characters. Mostly they would have these cute little hairy creatures that kind of followed you around in the game. It was all very much in the sort of fantasy style. Character looking quite Asian. The overall style looking ancient, as it were, but with a lot of magic. And the main character seems to be a sorcerer. The game's called Kena Bridge of Spirits, and it seems to be a sort of a action-adventure game, very much in the style of Zelda. So, obviously that's something to look very much forward to. This was one of the very few games in the presentation that pretty much gave a hint as to what sort of graphical advances the PlayStation 5 was giving, because the lighting was absolutely freaking gorgeous, and like everything in it was so well animated. It still did look like a video game, it still kind of moved like a video game, but the way everything moved in it looked really good. And whether that is just down to the individual talents of the animators, or whether it was just how the PS5 actually enhances that sort of thing, is obviously going to be a question to ask, but it did look really good. So the next game after that was a pretty odd looking title, if I'm to be completely totally honest. This one's called Goodbye Volcano High, and when I first saw it, the style was very sort of cel shady, but with 3D models, and even kind of like the animation style was very rough and made it look like a cartoon. But the overall feel of it was kind of like Life is Strange, only with animalistic creatures. It almost brought me back to Night in the Woods, which was a game that was released. It was, although that was a 2D game, this one was 3D, but it was done in a very sort of flat, shaded style. Someone brought up Beastars. I don't know if I'd go that far, if I'm to be completely honest. The style in this game is very, very sort of abstract compared to Beastars, but it looked really rather interesting. Of course, the only thing I would say about that though is, what sort of game is it? It didn't really show that. It showed a lot of shots of like different scenarios, and it could have just been an animated feature, which again, I know a lot of people sort of like were going on about, oh, they're showing nothing but cinematics in there. I wouldn't say that was true. A lot of gameplay was shown. It's just that some of the things that kind of stood out more were the ones that didn't show that much gameplay at all, because they're the ones that looked kind of interesting. So that was a game that is coming in 2021. They didn't say when, but it's coming next year. This next one was a bit odd in more ways than one. It was a game that we've seen many times before. It was revealed way back. I completely totally forgotten that it was that far back, and quite frankly, you kind of wonder, what on earth is going on with this game? Why is it taking so long? What are the creators even doing? Why are we seeing the same trailer again? Just stuff like that. Anyway, this game was done by Oddworld Inhabitants and is called Oddworld Soulstorm. pretty much the same gameplay as you find in most other Oddworld games, all sort of like 2.5D stuff. And again, really nothing that stood out to me as the next gen game at all. You know, you could say, oh, well, this is all an engine and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, what's that offering for me over a pre-rendered sequence then? Anyway, so that was that game. The next game, though, by Tango Gameworks, this is something I did see before. I'm pretty sure I did see it. I think it might have been last E3. The game's called Ghostwire. It's done by Shinji Mikami, and it's essentially a horror game where you are running around Tokyo City, essentially interacting with extremely strange beings, and are able to cast all sorts of magic and they're able to manipulate the environment and all that kind of stuff. It looked absolutely mental, and as a video game I would probably look very much forward to it. As a PS5 showcase though, I am still not convinced. But maybe it's not all about that. Maybe it's about the game. I mean, that's what I was kind of thinking. I'm thinking, well, the game looks absolutely crazy, you know. But again, it just feels like something I've seen before. To me, it didn't really showcase any of the PS5 strengths that made it stand out from what was going on in current gen, really. So next game after that is called Jett, the Far Shore. At least I think that's called Jett. I kind of found that title a bit hard to read, in all complete honesty. But it looked like you were hopping from one planet to another from Earth. The art style is very stylized, like a lot of flat shading and, you know, very monotone. Had interesting things like something that looked like a back of a huge creature, but you were kind of flying over it. So I'm wondering if it is kind of planet hopping, going from one environment to another and finding all this weird stuff, all in this sort of abstract art style, which I have to admit, you know, didn't really look that unique. So again, I didn't really kind of get what was being added there in terms of, I don't know, I suppose it doesn't have to, you know, the game could just basically be something shown on its own. But hey, it's coming out on the PlayStation 5 in the holiday of 2020. The next game I have seen before. This is by Gearbox, and it was a game called Godfall. I remember they showed a cinematic which I suppose was running on next gen hardware, and they'd actually showed the game here, and they actually showed some gameplay. And I gotta say, even though like the characters and the environment looked fantastic, the game itself looked kinda ropey. Even parts of the environment kind of didn't look particularly great. And again, this was a really fast-paced action game, being streamed off a live stream. But the thing is, I'm watching the VOD and the frame rate was ropey. The compression artifacts still kind of like ruined the overall image quality. It wasn't a good looking trailer. It didn't convince me at all. And I think with this one really supposed to be showcasing what next gen would bring, it didn't make me excited at all. You know, the actual designs of the character looked pretty cool, but beyond that, that's about it. You know, I wasn't particularly that impressed, sadly. The next game that came out was from the creators of Hyper Light Drifter, and I have a feeling if it wasn't for the stream, I'd have been a heck of a lot more impressed. It looks very interesting. Again, it's a very abstract style, a lot of flat shading, a lot of foliage and stuff. The main character looks like it could have come from the first Hyperlight Drifter game, but again, there was nothing really there that really stood out to me as being kind of next gen. But the game's called Solar Ash, and it seems like, again, an action, maybe possibly an action platformer. It didn't really show that much in the way of gameplay, so I couldn't really tell. Anyway, so that one's coming out in 2021 as well. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more of what that actually is. The next game was pretty much kind of a snippet of the next Hitman game, which was Hitman 3. First it showed off a cinematic with Agent 47 and a whole bunch of things. I don't really play the Hitman series, and I don't really know much of what's going on there. They did show what was supposedly some gameplay, but even then I wasn't sure. Maybe that's a good thing, but from what I actually saw of it, it made me question whether it was actually gameplay at all, really. You know, it all looked really nice and shiny, had lots of like volumetric effects in the background, a lot of like shiny stuff showing off the ray tracing and stuff like that. Again, in terms of like movement and stuff like that, it still looked very, very gamey. Still looked like a video game. Didn't look like anything beyond that. Anyway, so that's coming out in 2021. After that, they showed a little showcase of the Astro Robo, I think it's called. I forget what it's called in complete honesty, but basically this was a new game in that series called Astro's Playroom, and it's like a nice, fun looking thing. I don't know if it's a platformer or a series of mini games or or sandbox sort of thing. I don't know, in all complete honesty. One thing that I was a little bit weirded out from this game was that there was a distinct lack of anything showcasing PlayStation VR, which, you know, one of the strengths of the first game, it was essentially the PSVR's killer app in terms of what, you know, how a conventional game could work in VR. I didn't really see that in this trailer, and they didn't say anything about PlayStation VR either, so it didn't really mean that much to me in all complete total honesty. The next game after that, which was called Little Devil Inside, you're this adventurer running around in these sort of crazy forest environments and taking all manner of creatures and surfboarding on penguins in the desert, which, okay. It's all, again, very much stylized. Not so much flat shading, but very sort of abstract kind of style. Again, no, pretty much highlighting, I suppose, you know, the platform's flexibility in Allstars. It's all kind of starting to look a bit samey, and again, I don't see anything there that pops out for me from last gen, really. The style's very interesting, but it's not anything that stands out to me. Guess you have to see what the game actually is, because again, they're just showing trailers and letting the game speak for itself, but not actually talking about what the actual game is. I mean, they kind of do sometimes, like this next title, showcased by Zion Williams of the New Orleans Pelicans, is a new NBA 2K title, which basically is just a cinematic of a digitized version of him, you know, playing around with a basketball. Okay, we haven't seen that before, or we haven't seen it like this. I think we have, in all complete honesty. I'm sorry to say. You know, I wasn't particularly like, where's the actual gameplay? Why were we just showing this shot? You know, but at least we know it's a basketball game, but it makes it obviously kind of obvious what it is, given who's presented it and how it's been shown. But it could be anything, you know, could be like NBA Street or something like that, I don't know. The next game after that, though, was a bit of a weird one. It was a game called bug snacks in which, I don't know if it's you as a player, essentially walking around this environment full of little creatures who are essentially things you can eat. First shot of the trailer is basically this little strawberry creature running around going, strawberry, strawberry, strawberry. It literally was saying strawberry. And this walrus type thing who was doing a bit of a Steve Irwin was like saying, oh wow, look at this fella. Oh wow, isn't he interesting? And oh wow, doesn't he taste great? And oh wow, I've got strawberries on the end of my arm. What on earth's going on there? But essentially what it is that you go around eating these creatures and essentially you take on their properties, which is a bit weird, but very kind of interesting. It's by the same people who did Octodad, if you remember that game. And I remember that game being fun, but also being extremely janky. And this bug snack doesn't look as janky, so there's promise there. Again, as far as looks are concerned, honestly, just it looks extremely basic in terms of the style. There's nothing there that makes it stand out from any other current gen game, or possibly even the last gen game, really. But then neither did Octodad. It was very kind of like simplistic graphical style. But yeah, that game's coming out in holiday 2020. And you can, I'm pretty sure a lot of these games they can also get on Steam. I mean, there was a number of these games that are all just like indie titles that are also coming out on this. So what are they all doing in this presentation? I would say that they were essentially there to fill out the library in terms of showing how diverse it is and how many games there would be at launch, rather than showing anything about what the PlayStation 5 is adding to it. Anyway, the next title after that was something that we could be genuinely excited about. This was presented to us by Shuhei Yoshida, and it turns out to be essentially a remake of Demon's Souls, and that looked absolutely fan-freaking-tastic. This was the game that kind of followed, I think it was King's Field or something like that. That was sort of pretty much the Dark Souls before Dark Souls came out, and every other game had to be Dark Souls after it came out. The point of that, though, is that this was the game that came out on the PlayStation 3, and it was essentially an RPG very much in the style of sort of like medieval fantasy, with a lot of eldritch creatures that you had to fight, and all very visceral. All of these gargantuan creatures that you've had to take down. But it did look very good. A lot of destructive environments. The main character looked like he was fully kitted out. The environments looked fantastic. There was lots of like these really nice visual effects going on. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like as a video game, because again, cinematic trailer, which okay, but that is a game to look forward to on the PlayStation 5. The game after that was a game that was showcased before. It's kind of a first-person shooter with a twist, where essentially you as a character in the middle of a city with everyone trying to get you, and the only way out of this situation is to essentially not die. And the problem with that, as well as everyone coming after you, there is another person coming after you who essentially has the key to you not dying. But the problem is, well, they want to kill you as well. The game's called Deathloop. Like I said, it was showcased, I think it was last E3 or something like that, or might have been in the Video Game Awards. I completely totally forgot. The style of this one is kind of rough, ready, kind of Sin City-esque type stuff, although not necessarily Sin City, more Pulp Fiction-esque stuff like that. It's all in this urban environment where all these crazy masked guys are getting at you, and there's a female assassin after you all the time, but you're an assassin too, and essentially you're stuck in this situation where you're trying to get away, but if you get shot, you essentially have to go back to the beginning, do the whole thing over again. But there's a way of getting out of this supposed death loop. The style of this game, again, doesn't say anything next gen to me, so I kind of have to skip that really and just say, well, whatever, we'll see what that looks like when it comes out. Next game after that, I'm sure I'm not the only one who almost immediately recognised through the whole style of it what this game was, and I was really excited. This was a game called The VIIIage, only after seeing the trailer, I think we all know what it was, really, because the first 4 letters then revealed the Roman numerals for 8, and at that point we all knew it was Resident Evil 8. It looked fan-freaking-tastic. I think it's running on the same engine as Resident Evil 7, so that's pretty much why I recognised it. So essentially it's more of a direct sequel to that game than anything else. And the fact that it looked great as it is, I think is more testament to that engine. And even with that, I saw bits of it that looked really, really rough. Kind of like not anything that a PlayStation 4 couldn't do. But then it comes to question what the PS5 is adding to that. But like I said, it looked great. If you took it on its own, you didn't know what platform it was coming onto, you would be like, wow, this game looks absolutely fan-freaking-tastic. But here's the showcase. To me, it was like, awesome, we're getting the sequel to Resident Evil 8. That's all we need. The game after that, which was also by Capcom, again, didn't see an actual gameplay. It was very much a cinematic. It was called Pragmata, and I'm not really clear on what it actually is, because basically there was this guy in a spacesuit wandering around an empty city, scanning everywhere where there might have been people, but they're just sort of outlines of people showing up with the dust that's around them. But there's this one little girl with a translucent cat. I have no idea what that's all about. This guy just basically takes off with her and stops this satellite from colliding with everything, and then ends up on the moon. You can see the Earth from there, and that's it. And it's coming in 2022. So it's very little known about the game. But it was a very interesting cinematic, and we'll see what it's about when you know more about it, I suppose. Game after that, very excited about, because it's a sequel to a game that came out on the PlayStation 4. Pretty much around the same time that the Nintendo Switch was launched, so there was unfair comparisons to a certain other game of kind of a similar ilk. I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about right now. But this is a sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, which is called Horizon 2 Forbidden West. So in this game, Aloy is still the main character, and she's going through even more varied environments now. There's this sort of lost underwater city. There's a desert with, like, again, sort of lost futuristic civilizations. It's still very much in the same vein. There's a lot more kind of organic creatures running around, as well as the mechanized dinosaur type things that's showcased in this trailer as well, so that's kind of interesting. But there's still these lush green environments surrounding it. That sort of gave a hint to what the extra power the PlayStation 5 was offering, because there seemed to be a heck of a lot more going on in it than the first game, and it still looked just as gorgeous as the first game did. Again, there is probably the argument of whether this could have been done on the PlayStation 4 Pro because it has more memory and this and that and whatever. But the fact of the matter is, it's a sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn and it's on any platform, so obviously it's going to be offering a lot more. And you kind of think, what the extra capability of the PlayStation 5 will add to that. But it did give a fairly decent taste of what it was offering in that trailer. So that was a good reveal. That was really nice. And after that, we came to what a heck of a lot of people were wondering about the PlayStation 5, and that was indeed what it looked like. And it looked like this. And that's the first thing you see, which made me wonder, okay, so it doesn't look like a PC. Microsoft needs to take a bit of a page out of the Xbox Series X literally look like a PC for these sakes. The only problem being is that it doesn't look like anything that you'd think a 21st century piece of hardware would look like. Immediately, straight after the reveal, there was all sorts of memes saying, oh, it looks like an air conditioner, it looks like my mate flipping wireless router, and oh, it looks like this old console, like the Phantom, remember that? The console that never actually came out, it's like that, it looks like a radiator. I'll put all that aside, putting all the memes aside, it just looked a bit wonky and all over the place. I could kind of get that what they were going for with the whole kind of V scenario. As you can see, it's tapered upwards on both sides, which makes it look like a V, as in V is in the Roman numeral for 5. Hardy ha 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 ha. But then there's also this weird lump coming out of the side of it, and it's got this slot, which, contrary to the nice sort of curvatures of everything else, is just this rectangular slot, which is obviously where the Blu-ray goes in, but it just looks so horribly out of place. And then there's this lump on the side, which obviously makes it look asymmetrical, but it's not really well hidden, and it just makes it look really, really weird. Putting that aside, the controller kind of makes it feel almost kind of retro in a sense. It's kind of like what people, back in the 2000s and 1990s imagined what a futuristic thing would look like. But you kind of think, well, why would you then just go ahead with that then? And plus, it almost looks like almost every other device that already exists in the house. Just looks really weird. And like I said, that Blu-ray slot is so out of place, it just ruins the entire look of the thing. However, as they revealed more of it, they then showed another one on the side without the lump. It looked totally symmetrical. It still had that V sort of motif on it. And it turns out to be the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, which obviously foregoes the Ultra Blu-ray player, and put in its place, well, nothing, because it doesn't need it. It's just the PlayStation 5 with the internal SSD storage. That's it. The contrast between those two is immense. You may kind of think, oh, it's just missing the thing with the little lump on the side, but no, it makes the one on the right, which is the digital edition, which is the one without the physical games, looks so much better. And I wasn't the only one who did this. My first thought after seeing that was like, wow, that looks much better. My thought after that was like, Sony, what are you playing at? the normal PlayStation 5 looked awful with that Blu-ray slot looking so utterly out of place, and this lump on the side. It looks so bad. And the digital edition looks so much better. And I know a lot of people will say, well, the digital edition is not like the Xbox One S digital edition, that doesn't have the Blu-ray player and doesn't have the slot, even with the slot it looks pretty much okay. It's an option. It's the digital edition stops. It's not like they're going to ditch physical games because it's supposed to be sold worldwide and not everyone has internet and so on and such, so they're going to be getting the physical edition. I'm like, okay, fair enough. My point still stands. They're obviously pushing more for the digital edition. Even though it's going to be sold worldwide, we know what the major markets are going to be the ones that are more tech savvy and have better internet and so on and such. And they're going to look between these two and they're going to say, well, this one doesn't have that lump and that nasty slot on the side, so I'm going to get that one. And then there's the question of price, which we still don't have the price on there, by the way. But, a question of how's it going to be priced is, would the normal PlayStation 5 be more expensive because it's got the Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and the digital edition be cheaper because it doesn't? Would the digital edition be more expensive because it got a bigger SSD in it than the PS5 one, which, since it has the optical Blu-ray player in it, probably won't have as much internal storage? Questions that haven't been answered, or I haven't looked into the answers. But to me, that was extremely iffy. I'm not so sure about that. Most people are going on about, the SSD and the PlayStation 5 and the graphic capabilities and ray tracing and that. But to me, the biggest takeaway from this was the existence of the digital edition PlayStation 5 and what that means from the platform as a whole, and what that means for gaming as a whole in terms of pushing. I have to admit, nowadays, a lot of my game purchases are digital. For starters, I've got a Wii U library of almost every Wii U game that exists. Well, most of them anyway. It wasn't exactly a huge library, but I've got quite a few Wii U discs on my person. But I've also got a lot of indie titles on my Wii, and most of those could only be purchased digitally, even though there was some that you could actually get on the disc. My 3DS library, in contrast, I got like 5 or 6 3DS cartridges. Most of them are other purchases, which again mostly consist of like small games and other indie titles. I got more digital games on my 3DS than I've got physical ones. It has to be said. Even like mainline titles. And as for my PC, well, as for the nature of the PC, physical games and that are long gone. The only thing that you're going to get out of that really on the CD or DVD is just a Steam key or a GOG key or an Epic Games key on it. That's essentially what it is. Everything else is just going to be on the digital platform. But I'm kind of okay with that because I can actually then port those games pretty much anywhere onto any new system that I get, or any other another system that I got around at home or someone else's place. There's still pretty much the bugbear of digital games being only out as long as the company wants it to be, or downloadable as they want it to be, and like the online services coming to a halt, where you can't download the game anymore, can't get updates on them anymore, or you just can't get the game, period, because it's on an old platform that's just not supported. Or like I said before, if the company decided to just halt the game. And that's the bugbear of a digital game, is that the ownership is taken out of your hands. All you're given is a license to play the game. And the fact that Sony seems to be pushing digital with the PlayStation 5 digital edition. And yes, I know the physical edition exists and you can get it, and if you want to get that, it's fine. But it just seems to me they're gunning for more digital sales. I'm not sure if I'm okay with that, if in all complete honesty. Anyways, so that's all I've got to say about that. PlayStation 5 still needs a convincing argument as to what it's bringing to next-gen gaming, and it's not being answered through this presentation. It needs to be answered through the actual games when they come out and the player experience. And that's essentially my conclusion to the whole thing. Unfortunately, the presentation didn't offer the answer to that. It just showed a bunch of really good looking games that could have been on any current gen platform. But there are a few standout titles that anyone would certainly look forward to regardless of what it's coming out on, really. Anyway, that's my thoughts. What do you think about the PlayStation 5, and what do you think about the movement they're making with this digital edition? And do you think the design is kind of influential to what you would purchase, or would you just say, no, so that I like my physical games, I'm gonna go with lump, and I'm just gonna have to lump it. Hey, bad jokes aside, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching or listening or whatever you're going to be doing. You've been awesome. And stay safe, folks. Wash your hands, go by all the guidelines while we're going through this pandemic. And, keep in contact with your loved ones. And, just keep having a good time and keep on playing, folks.